Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. So today we have a very interesting guest on. We have Shane Finn, a runner from Kerry, but I wouldn't just call him a runner. He's an ultra endurance athlete. He has covered many things from 12 marathons in 12 days to 24 marathons in 24, and even ran and cycled across the US. So Shane, thanks a million for coming on.
Hey Robbie, what's going on, man? Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Come here. I'll let you explain what you've done in the past, what you're doing at the moment, and give us a rundown of who you are.
Yeah, I've done a lot of stupid things over the last 10 years, if that's a good place to start. Listen, look, I suppose, a lot of people will know me as a runner. I suppose that's what I am. I suppose I started running back in 2010. I had never really ran before. I just played GAA, to be honest, with the local GAA club here. Went to the gym a couple of times a month or whatever, so everything I do to this day happened by complete accident. I just decided to run the Dingle Marathon in 2010 to try to raise money for my cousin's charity. So basically my cousin lives with a condition called spina bifida, and she's had a very, very tough life. I was just 18 years old. We said, I'm just going to run the Dingle Marathon. And it's funny now how, I spend my week and my days training people to do these things. And I ran 6 miles twice before my first marathon. And just in case anybody doesn't know, a marathon's 26 miles, 26.2 actually. Needless to say that I suffered a lot. I think the most biological pain I've ever felt in my life was in that first marathon. But it had a massive impact in my life. And, I literally turned a different direction at that point. And just running, I suppose, kind of took over my life really and gave me a massive sense of purpose, a huge sense of self-belief, which I actually lacked massively growing up, and some confidence, because it's similar enough, I suppose, to maybe some people listening in. Growing up, I lacked a lot of confidence. As I mentioned, I lacked a lot of self-belief in myself. Didn't really want to put myself out there and things like that. And to be honest, running was the one thing I did. And that marathon was the first thing I ever did for myself. And I had to finish it on my own. Nobody can run a marathon for you. So it's very, as much physical pain it was very much so a mental shift. And literally, no pun intended, but kind of lost run of myself after that. That was 2014. I ended up running from Dublin to Dingle over 12 days. 2017, I ran around Ireland from Donegal to Dingle. Then 2019, I cycled and ran from the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco to the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. And here I am today. I'm still alive, which is always a bonus as well. So listen, that's what I do. And obviously I'm working full time for myself now as well, a coach and stuff like that. So it's it's all good, man.
Excellent. It's good to hear. And just kind of jumping straight into that. First, obviously you started off for a great cause, and I can even see it now, everything you're posting on Instagram. It's always for a good cause, which is great to see. So looking at it first, so let's say you did your first marathon. How did the mindset develop, and how did it change to go from a marathon to decide to run across Ireland, to run around Ireland to the States?
Yeah, it was pretty natural. I mean, or unnatural, depending on if you've ever done anything like this before. I suppose, when I did that first marathon, Robbie, I was naive would be a very, very nice way of putting it. Both, mentally and very physically. I look at, I've seen pictures of myself running my first marathon. I'm like, how did I not completely really, really hurt myself? I didn't look strong, I looked weak. I had no leg muscle, nothing. So it was just natural progression. I remember after that first marathon being in so much pain, being like, I'm never doing one of those again. That was horrendous. And 3 days later, I was actually in college in UL, in first year in college in UL. And I remember not going to a tutorial because it was up a stairs, and I couldn't walk properly. So I was like, I'm not going. I can't come. I can get up, but I won't be able to come back down.
Yeah.
So I was just like, that's grand. I'll just go to the one next week or whatever. And that moment I was just like, dude, you're 18 years old, you're fit, you're healthy. Come on, there's more in you than that, So then I decided to run a few more marathons, train properly, started to, teach myself. I was like, and then I saw started seeing big gains, I started seeing change. I was like, my body's changing, I'm getting fitter, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting leaner, I was getting faster. And as you and a lot of listeners might know, that's an addictive feeling, man. When you start getting that feeling of progression and feeling good and feeling better all the time. That is a very hard thing to shake off when you do get it. So from there, I suppose the charity aspect was huge. I saw what an impact that first marathon had, not only on my cousin and her just being so happy, but the money it raised for the charities, like Spina Bifida Ireland were a very small charity and they didn't get a lot of national funding and stuff. So I said, why don't, like, everybody was starting to do marathons for charity then. And I was like, I need to do something a bit different, So I was at a seminar in Dublin one day and I came out of the seminar, my van wouldn't start. And I remember calling my dad, and this is very random. It's very Irish, actually. And I said, the van won't start. Like, what do you think I should do? Like, And he said, do you know what you can do now? He said, I told you not to buy that van so you can figure it out or you can run home. And now my dad's not a mechanic, but, I think as Irish dads, they know everything about everything. Do you know what I mean? And unfortunately, he was fucking right that time. But got the van started and I was driving out of Dublin and I was just like, I wonder how long is it to run home to Dingle, like, So I clocked it and I was just like, that's mad, I was like, geez, that is mad, imagine running home from Dublin.
Yeah.
So anyway, about a month later, I was up there again and I was just like, I'll take the old Dublin road home because I said I can't run down the motorway. I said, yeah, because I'd get obviously arrested or something. So clocked it down the old Dublin road and turned out to be 11 marathons and we manipulated the route a little bit and made it 12. And off I went and ran from Dublin to Dingle. That was my first kind of jump into ultra endurance. That was in 2014, so 4 years after my first marathon. That was the first step. Obviously, after that, I was just like, right, that's it, I'm done. At the time, I was running a business with my best friend Mark. We had WK Fitness running in Dingle, which was going really, really well. So it took 3 years out then, and obviously kept training because I love training so much, and decided to run the 24 and 24. Now, the 24 and 24 was, a lot of people think it's just double 12, and it is, you are correct, but it has a little bit more meaning to it than that. I suppose in Christmas of 15-16, we were out for dinner, family dinner, and my cousin Mary and her family were there as well, and by pure and utter chance, it's like, those moments in your life that just something happened and you're just like, was this meant to happen at this point? And I actually think about things at a pretty deep level, like those kind of things that happen. We all have things that happen in our life that we're like, well, imagine if I actually wasn't there and would I be where I am now? So this is one of these moments, and we went into the restaurant anyways in Dingletown, and who happens to be inside are only one of Mary's doctors, who had been one of her doctors since she was a child. We got chatting and they were leaving, and just as they were leaving, he said to me, are you the guy who does the running? Mary's told me all about you. I was just like, yeah. And he goes, geez, he said, you don't know how much joy you bring your cousin. She always talks about you when she comes in. And what he said to me next will stay with me for the rest of my life. He looked at me and he said, as he was turning out the door, he goes, I don't know if you know, but that girl feels the feeling of pain 24 hours a day. And that was like, it hit me across the head. It's like someone had a sledgehammer and just went smack the side of the head. I remember sitting down at dinner that evening in that restaurant, just numb. Like I wasn't present. I was just like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just so comfortable. I was like, there's so much more I can do to help people like my cousin Mary. So that's where the idea of the 24 marathons came from, because 24 hours a day is so difficult for somebody with a disability and their family too. So yeah, it all just kind of transpired like that. And then obviously the America trip happened 2 years later then again. So I don't know what's going to happen next, but hopefully it won't be as crazy as the last few.
Yeah, Jesus. That as you were saying there, like when things fall into place like that or happen like that, you do wonder, is there something else working in above? Like, but I would have the same kind of idea myself, is that you do wonder at certain times of your life, was that the way it was supposed to be? And I really like that idea of the way you were saying that it kind of set you back, in that it was something you had done in the past. And had you considered it that much in the past, you understood that she enjoyed it, but had you considered it at that level, that it brought that much enjoyment and that much joy to her life, that it was life changing. So I can see how it would pass over to yourself. And when you were doing the run, so when you were doing the 24 marathons, is that something that you would fall back on? Is that something that you would think back on when times got tough?
Hugely, massively, yeah. Because look, there's only so much kind of, we'll say, internal motivation you can muster. Do you know what I mean? Like I talk and write and speak about kind of self-doubt and stuff quite a lot. And the thing about it is that, like, you know, you can listen to whatever you want and you can watch all the David Goggins videos on YouTube, but like you said, we all have self-doubt. We all have negative self-talk in our brain, but it's what you do when it comes and when it arrives. It's how you deal with it when it gets there, I think, is one of the things I've learned. And I learned that massively in the 24 marathons, because like it's a long day. And I remember waking up on morning number 4 of the 24 marathons, like in a hotel, and be like struggling like to get out of bed, you know. And I remember looking down the bed and just seeing like down by my feet, the bed sheet was like bloody. So like my blister had like burst that night. And, you know, I was getting out of bed that morning with like blood seeping down out of my big toe, and I had 20 more marathons to run, you know. And I remember just like my auntie, one of my aunties were happened to be at the hotel that evening. And again, my my support crew was basically my family. You know, so basically what would happen is in the mornings or in the evenings or whatever, we'd have a little family dinner or breakfast or whatever, and it was always really nice. And you know, I went down to the lobby of the hotel on this particular morning and said, yeah, I'm sore, like I'm in pain this evening, you know, or this morning. And I remember I only had flip flops on, and this was a pretty nice hotel. And I walked in like I just come out of World War II. Do you know what I mean? And like my feet were bleeding, and I was just like this. You know, I'd say that the people who work in the hotel were like, "Where is this fella after coming from?" And my auntie just leans over to me and says, you know, like she said, you know, the people that you're doing this for would give anything to get out of bed on their own in the morning. And that was another moment I was just like, I remember just literally like finishing my bowl of porridge and getting up and like literally running out the door saying like, come on. And so, you know, and like little things like that, you realize that the things that you're struggling with, the things that you're facing on a daily basis or in a big event like that are actually very, very minute and very, very small. And I always say as well, you know, when we're kind of like with the events, the days and stuff like that, and the money, it's all fantastic. But like ultimately, like we say across America, 36 days, on day 37, my life went back to normal. I went back to being Shane. I went back to doing whatever I wanted to do. Do you know what I mean? My shift was over. Like, but when you think about it, my cousin and everybody else, like my cousin, would have to get up and start their fight again. They don't get it. They don't get to go back to being like a normal life, you know. So that was a big, big thing for me as well. I started to learn, you know, look, as I was young when I started all this stuff like 11 years ago now. So like I learn a lot and I'm still learning too, you know. So there's some of the things I've learned over the last number of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is those, I suppose you were saying there's only so much internal motivation that can drive you on. You need that outside at times. Like you definitely need that external few external motivators to keep you going, especially when you're achieving a goal like that, something so big, in fairness, the amount of lives that it does change when you are raising that amount of money and when you are affecting that many lives on a personal level. But really, like, just, I know you come back to it, but it's important to remember that it is that person that you can connect to. It's the person that you relate to. So when it is your family, it makes such a difference. It really does make such a difference in what you can do and what you can go through. So looking from then on and progressing from the 24 marathons, and you went to the States, and first that shift in mindset, what was it like? Was it just a progression? Was it just, okay, right, I've done 24, so it couldn't be that hard? Or how did that come about? Can't imagine it was that easy.
Basically what happened really was after the 24 marathons, you know, I decided that I was going to take some time off. I was going to go back to work in the business, et cetera, et cetera. And what actually happened, Robbie, right, is the building. So myself and my business partner, Mark, were running a pretty big training facility in Dingle. And we were having, let's just put it nicely, a lot of trouble with our landlords. And then ultimately the building was sold. And our a huge impact on our business. So we ultimately had to move. We had to close for a short period and then move. And in that short period of time, basically what we did was we sold the business, and I managed to step away. So I guess it was at a point where I was just like, I'm just going to go all into my business after 24 marathons, and then to being kind of almost gone, being like, okay, wow, Jeannie Mac, this is a big void. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose, yeah, look, I suppose I was looking for something, but I just didn't admit it. Maybe I do remember after the 24 marathon saying, never again am I doing anything like that. That is horrific. It's not worth it, et cetera, et cetera. But it was worth it, you know? So I was actually in America at the time. I got invited over to do some guest lecturing at a university in Connecticut, about an hour and a half north of Manhattan. And I was in this little cafe beside the water, and I'll never forget it. It's, again, one of those moments you're just like, God, I wonder, like, if I hadn't answered the phone that day, what would have happened, you know? But my phone rang from an Irish number, and I'm over and back to America quite a lot. I've got American SIM cards. I've got a visa. I'm over and back there a bit, like, you know. And usually, if it was an Irish number, I wouldn't answer it, or they'd leave a voicemail or send me an email, or if it was a family, they'd give me a WhatsApp or whatever. So I didn't answer it, and then it rang again, and I was just like, I better answer this. And it was one of the guys who worked in the charity in the offices in Dublin. And he said, I got bad news. And my first thought was that somebody's after passing away. That was my first thing that came to mind, you know. But the bad news basically was that the charity were getting their funding cut by 50 grand next year. And that was, look, 50K it's not going to like be the be all and end all of something. But for a small organization that literally relies on donations, it was a very, very big blow for them. You know, and I was quite angry because we just literally finished running the 24 marathons. We'd raised 142K. Like we had a massive impact, like to people all over Ireland. And then to have that happening, and he said that funding would have usually been allocated for the kids' summer camps every year. So this now meant that the kids' summer camps couldn't happen in 2020, which made me really, really angry. Now, ultimately, they would have been, you know, cancelled because of COVID anyway, but it's not really the point. So in 2018, I was like, hey, listen, you know, this isn't on. Early 2018, I was just like, you know, in America, I was like, well, that's it. Every ultra endurance athlete would love to cross America. So I decided to start plotting out a route to see if I could cross America in 36 days. And basically 36 is like, because I've done 12, 24. I was like, I'd like to do something in 36 days, you know? So yeah, off I went and started planning it. We kept it all in-house in my family for about 3 months to make sure if it was even possible. I wouldn't have gone and done it unless my dad could have come. So my dad's been like my main right-hand man for all these kind of big ultra endurance events. And, you know, I'm very lucky to have him there in these events as well, because like he knows me as good as anyone. He knows when to tell me to shut up. He knows when to kind of put his arm around me. He knows when to tell me to go on, keep going, or slow it down, or whatever it might be, you know. So yeah, he's been with me since that first marathon, you know, so it was really, really good to have him. So I need to make sure he could come, because my parents have their own small business here in Dingle as well. So the thing about it is that when I do decide to go do one of these things, it's not just me that's affected anymore. I have to check in with other people as well. So yeah, look, the goal was to try raise the money that the charity lost, so the summer camps could go ahead. And we did. We raised double what we needed crossing the US. So we raised just over 80 grand crossing the US, which is amazing. So that meant that the summer camps could go ahead in 2019 and also 2020. Now they were cancelled in 2020 because of COVID, as mentioned, but at least we know that the money's there for them to go ahead, you know, maybe this summer or next summer. So yeah, man, it was an awesome experience. Like, America was hard. America was tough. It was relentless every single day. You know, Google Maps, I would drop a pin every time I'd finish a day or start a day. And then I'd, you know, look at the map of how far I came that evening. And some days you'd cycle 310K and like you've barely moved across the continent of America. And that'd be from one side of Ireland to the other. You know, so like that was hard, but again, it just, you know, same as everything, you know, keep showing up every day as best you can, keep chipping away, and you will get there, you know. And that was very much so the case in America.
Yeah, Jesus, that's well, first, fair play. 80,000 is some achievement to put down, especially in putting yourself under that much pressure and putting the body under that much stress. And it's so surprised, you would be surprised at what the body can adapt to once you put it under the right amount of stress and kind of take the right recovery protocols and that. So before I dig into that, because I'm going to dig into that now in a while, but just before I do, how does someone go about even starting something like that or setting it up? Or like, what are the steps along in getting that set up?
As in the event itself,
I should say, yeah, in the event itself. Yeah.
We took a very Irish approach at Robbie. We winged most of it. No, look. That's not true. We winged about half of it. Basically, you know, we planned out a lot. Like I went to altitude for a good while beforehand to train. You know, we planned out the whole route. Like we went down to nitty gritties of like plotting hospitals into the route. Like, God forbid, in case anything happened to me. Like we had the route absolutely nailed. But it's funny, like life is funny, you know, you plan out all these things and you paint the perfect picture and then you're like, okay, let's go. And literally, man, day one, we were off script. Like, cause we got lost, we got detoured because there was a shooting in San Antonio. I had to go around the city instead of going straight through it. We took a wrong road into Sacramento, ended up like down some alleyway with fellas like burning fires, like beside tents and stuff. And I was just like, we're off script here big time, you know? So that's one thing I always say to people is like, stop waiting for everything to be perfect. Just go, like, do you know what I mean? So we had to figure out a lot of it as we went. We had to change a few things as we went, but ultimately the end goal was always to get to Brooklyn Bridge on May the 3rd at 3 o'clock. So we had a lot of it planned. We had a huge RV. So anybody has seen the movie Meet the Fockers, where they press the button and the sides expand. So we rented one of those. We got one of those sponsored, which is awesome. So that brought a lot of comfort. So I could sleep in an actual bed rather than like camping or whatever on the side of the freaking road or something. And then we could cook real food too, which was obviously a big help. So yeah, like it was just very much so, we didn't have to get any permissions from any county councils or any state councils or anything like that, which is great. And in fairness, I have to say, I don't know if there's going to be any people from the US listening, but the people from the US were absolutely phenomenal. They were really, really amazing. Like anytime they saw our Irish flag flying off the RV, people would literally flag us down on the road, ask us if we needed anything, if we needed help. They'd been to Ireland in '94 on a summer holiday to County Clare and County Kerry and all this kind of stuff. And it was just really, obviously Ireland's a small country and sometimes we think all that exists is Ireland, but there's a big, big world out there. And that's one thing outside of the endurance stuff and outside of the charity work and the challenge itself, like the feeling I got of being welcomed over there in the even most remote places, like this campsite in Kansas. That's like something from Breaking Bad. Like people were like, what's the story of the Irish flag? We explained to them what we're doing. They're like, oh my God, that's so cool. So so we just chucked along. We hit campsites as much as we could. There was 1 or 2 nights we had to just do an outside of the road job, but you know what, look, it worked. We made it work. And like I said, the end goal was always to get to New York on May the 3rd, because my cousin Mary actually got to come to New York for the final thing, which was really, really special. Like she's 40 now. And like that girl was told she wouldn't live until she's 18. So like her dream's always been to come to New York and to get to see New York and the skyline and stuff like that. And I would say I'm probably blocked from every single staff of Aer Lingus on LinkedIn and Twitter, because I was like, there must be some way we can get this girl to New York, like just sponsor her ticket, please. And they did finally. I'd say relentlessly, I just kept emailing them, every single Aer Lingus email address I could find. I was pinging them off the email. And it worked anyways. And Mary got to be in New York for that final day. And I didn't want to keep her waiting, because she was on a journey of a lifetime and I wanted to be there to meet her. So yeah, it was cool, man. It was cool. Like I said, we had to make a lot of detours and change a lot of things, but we figured it out as we went.
Jesus, yeah, because we were talking about this when I was on your podcast. We were discussing just after about what you went through and a few different things. So we'll definitely dig into a few of those stories. But before we did that, I love the Irish approach to it. That's the only way to do it, really, isn't it? Figure it out as you go. Once you kind of have a general plan of what you're doing, figure it out and see what happens after that. But
the more I think about it, I've winged a lot of stuff, man, in the last 11 years.
It's working.
It's working. I'll probably wing a lot more in the next 11 as well. So sometimes it works, man, because like I remember that first night in America, like the day of I had been there for a while. So I was in Colorado, in Boulder, which is at like 6,000 feet training. And then I was in California training as well before I started. And I remember my dad and one of the other crew guys arrived in like 2 days before we started, basically. And my sister was there. And like, I remember starting on day 1 and the goal was to get onto the far side of Sacramento, kind of up near Lake Tahoe almost. And like, I remember just sitting there, like I had no phone coverage. The crew couldn't find me. I was completely lost, sitting outside a petrol station at like 9 o'clock at night in the pitch dark in the end of March. Like it was cold, just sitting there, no phone coverage, nothing. And this guy just pulls down a window of his truck. And this guy was a big boy. Like he was a big lad. He just asked me if I was okay. And I don't know what, I must have just thought I was in Kerry or something. I just like said something to him and he just burst out laughing. He goes, dude, I have no idea what you just said. And I was like, oh, sorry, I'm lost. He goes, where are you going? Now we were still in California at this point, right? And I was like, oh, I'm on my way to New York. And he burst out laughing again. He goes, you got a long way to go. I was like, no, it's been a pretty shitty start. So anyway, he let me use his phone. And luckily enough, I had my dad's phone number written down in this little pouch I would carry, like a bank card, some cash, just in case I needed to stop myself and the crew weren't around. And my dad's phone, American number written down on so I called them and they came and got me. But I remember going to sleep that night being like, you're in for some months. You know, you are in for some months. I remember just going to sleep that night and saying, look, just take it every day as it comes, and do as best you can. And yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, and at another time when things just landed at the right place at the right time, I suppose, really is what it was, wasn't it? And then going on from there, like let's say you had a tough day. Is there anything that you used, like even like a coping strategy, I suppose is what you call it in psychology? Anything that you used like that to kind of center yourself, reset, and go again?
Yeah, there was two in particular. Like I literally made them up as I was across America, right, and only kind of by the halfway point, really, right. One was basically, I call it the 5 minute rule. Okay, so if I was mentally going through a bit of a bad place, which you know, at the start I was using it like once a day, but as it went on, I was starting to use this thing like 10 times a day. So basically I'd be cycling along or running along like in the heat, or struggling or whatever it might be up at altitude. And look, bad things start going on in your mind. You're just like, I want to go home, like just go to the nearest airport and get me the hell out of here, whatever it might be. And when those things come in, what I do is I set a little timer on my watch, and I allow myself 5 minutes just to vent, to rant, to say what now. I'd say all these things internally, like the crew wouldn't even know this is going on in my head. You know, I'd just say all these things to myself internally, like, you know, I could say whatever you could say, the most horrible things to myself for that 5 minutes. Now, the trick was when that 5 minutes was up, I had to name 5 things I was grateful for at this very moment in time. So it was literally like, it's sunny today. My leg feels okay. I'm going to have an ice cream later. It just very, very simple, basic things. And it would instantly change my mood. Like instantly, it was actually freaky, because what I would do then is, as things went on and as the time passed, in that 5 minute gap where I was allowed to say whatever I want, I was really going to town on myself in that 5 minutes, because I knew when the 5 minutes is up and I named the 5 things I'm grateful for, I'd be in a completely different mood. It was very, very strange. And the more the event went on, the more profound that got. And then the one that came up with on day 19 was quite funny, actually. I was just like, I did a big, big day on day 19. We were just coming out of the Rockies. So I had literally climbed for 4 days straight. And I was coming out of the Rockies and down into Kansas, and Kansas is pan flat. And you'll enjoy this one, actually, being a Clare man. We went through this big, massive straight road. I'd say it was straight for over 20 miles. It didn't turn left or right. And I stopped to grab a bit of food, and my dad spotted a guy in a tractor, literally about 100 meters away. And we hadn't seen another person all day. And so my dad goes over talking to him, of course, and asking him about his tractor and stuff like that. And he asked him how many acres he had. So that night we went back to the campsite. My dad, you know, was trying to figure out, like, get context of how big this guy's farm was. And this guy's farm was just slightly smaller than the county of Clare per acre. And I was just like, so that's kind of the vastness of kind of where we were. Jesus, and there was nothing, man. There was nothing. Like there was literally nothing. It was just, there was no hills. It was just flat. And as far as you could see. And I remember on that day, like really making big progress and really like pushing a lot of power and really feeling good. I remember just saying to myself, if I keep moving, America will run out of land. It was just like, that's it. And I remember like flagging down the camper van and being like, I have it figured out. And my dad was like, what's wrong? I was like, if I keep moving, America will run out of land. And I'd say my dad was like, geez, he's losing it. He's starting, his mind is starting to go here. But you know what? It was a massive turning point when I think about it. I was over halfway. And I was like, if I keep moving, America will run out of land. But if I stop moving, America will win, you know? So I had to keep moving. If I kept moving, America would run out of land, and I'd eventually get back to the ocean, you know? So
yeah, that's
so simple, but it worked.
It's so simple, but I don't know if you follow Andrew Huberman. Do you watch Andrew Huberman? He's a neuroscientist from Stanford University.
No, but I will now.
Yeah, excellent friend. It'd be very good for the stuff that you're involved in as well. But basically, he talks about, they look at the Navy SEALs and they were like doing psychological tests on them, and they were checking which ones. You know, when they go through that, like it's like, is it Death Week they call it? Death Camp?
Hell Week, isn't it?
Hell Week, yeah, that's what it is. And obviously, the guys that get into Hell Week in the first place are the top of the top. So they're just to even get there, they have to be in serious condition. So they were trying to figure out who were the best and who actually gets through it. And by the end of it, so because you have to ring a bell to let people know you're quitting, which is a massive one for these guys and their egos and that. And David Goggins is one who went through it, I think 2 or 3 times, something crazy like that. But They basically said that, or they found that the guys who were able to complete Hell Week were the guys who were able to attach small wins down the road. So when they got to that win, then they kind of went back over it again. And I think that's a good idea in terms of it. It's a similar thing, is that if I keep moving, America's going to run out of land. There is going to be a certain stage that I will get to the end of this, and having that in the back of your head, and even using that other coping strategy, you're using 5 minutes, that you're taking the time to burst through it, or let yourself know what you really feel, and then taking the time after that then to be grateful for something. And that's connecting to small wins. So it's a kind of a similar approach to what they were using, I would think myself.
One thing you just said there, it actually just reminded me, it's only something I've really started doing post America, is like really journaling, like a lot, like really journaling and working on like gratitude and stuff like that. And it's actually, it's one regret I have, that I wasn't in that place in my mind when I was either getting ready for America or in America in the event itself. Because what happens a lot in endurance and ultra endurance and in life in general, and this is what I've noticed, especially with the kind of types of people that I work with, runners and stuff like that, we may train for an event or a competition or a race or something like that, and we actually place all our happiness into the event. We place all our happiness into doing the event well, when we should be really placing our happiness into the small little things we're doing each day that will actually help us get to where we are. So like you with the small wins, you know, we could, like, the funny thing is, people might have an absolutely amazing day, and one little small thing at 8 p.m. that night will just make them think they've had a bad day. When in hindsight, when you review your day and when you look back and you write down a few things, you're like, I actually had a pretty awesome day. But one little thing will always, you know, dominate that part of the brain and say, oh, today didn't go well because of this. But not to lose sight of all the things that did go well. You know, I think for me, that's even going forward now with different things in my own life and in endurance and business and whatnot. I'm just trying to stay a little bit more centered in what I'm doing today, rather than being constantly anxious about what's going on down the road, or in you know, an endurance sense, what's going to be happening the next day or in 10 miles time or whatever, you know. So yeah, I think, you know, very bit different, but very, very similar.
Yeah, and even swinging that back to like what I do myself with people who kind of have like long-term injuries and that are trying to get back to it. It is really connecting it to the process. It's not that, okay, you haven't, let's say, run in, or you haven't deadlifted in the last 3 years. Doesn't mean that you're going to be deadlifting next week, or doesn't mean that you're going to be running back to your same times as next week. But if we can get you from running, let's say, on a treadmill for 15 minutes a day, that's an improvement on yesterday. And we have to make sure that you think back on that, reflect on that, and actually come up with, like, as you were saying, be grateful for it. And then the next day is another day. So if you can get that mindset, especially in a rehab context, if you can get that mindset into people, because people who've been injured for a long time, they get very, and it's completely understandable, very negative about an injury, because it's been holding them back from what they want to get back to, and it's been holding them back for what they want to like achieve. So it is cultivating that mindset of, okay, every small win is a massive win. It's not that it's just a small win. It's every small win is the next step in the process. You're going to have setbacks, but every one you can do, we're obviously aiming towards an end goal, which kind of brings me on to my next one, which was, did you actually have any injuries or anything like that when in that? I can imagine you did in that long one.
Yeah, I'm probably your worst nightmare, Robbie, to be perfectly honest with you. I did. Yeah, look, I was in fantastic shape starting. One of my goals was to get to America and get to the start line fresh. That is key with these big multi-day endurance events. Like, you know, a lot of the times, Robbie, people would train for an event that's, you know, 4 hours or 3 hours. Like, this thing is 36 days. You know, I had to go like to the well, I had to go hard every day for over a month. So I was just like, if I have any weakness or any niggle or any like hint of an injury at the start, I'm in trouble. Like this is going to, like, the weak link of the chain will break, you know. So my priority was to get there as fit and as strong as I possibly could. I lifted weights quite heavy up until 3 days before I started. So I actually intentionally packed on a good bit of muscle and a good bit of weight before I started. Just because I'd learned from the 24 marathons that, like, I lose a lot of weight when I go into these things. Now, between starting in San Francisco and getting to New York, I'd lost about 15 pounds. So I lost a lot of the muscle I had put on. Now as well, you don't want to be, I don't want to be too chunky either, because you have to carry yourself in the bike up mountains and stuff like that. But you know, what I did notice was from day 5 to day 9, climbing up the Sierra Nevadas, I climbed every single day, like just straight for 4 days. And my right Achilles got very, very angry. Now, what has started to then happen was, because I was protecting that, the knee started to get a little bit sore as well. Very, very natural. But I was really lucky that my physio was with me on the trip. So without her, to be honest, I really probably wouldn't have got to New York, I don't think. So just, again, someone to do a bit of soft tissue work in the morning, get everything activated and woken up. Just little things like that, small little things that you could do yourself, but like someone else to do them for you, or keep you accountable to doing them was really important. And funny enough, by kind of day 20, my Achilles had kind of healed. It had kind of set itself up again, and I wasn't strapping my ankle. I was able to put power down through the pedal. Knee was fine. But what had happened next was I started actually losing feeling in my two outer fingers in both my hands, just from like a bit of ulnar nerve like entrapment. So again, putting pressure down on my wrists and stuff. That was quite unpleasant, because my ability to brake and things was now like not as good as what it should have been really on the road. And then the last thing is my neck. Like I was really struggling to look over my left shoulder. So here in Ireland, we cycle on the left-hand side of the road. So you look over your right shoulder. In America, you cycle on the right and you look over your left. So just with the ulnar nerve entrapment, I couldn't really look over my shoulder. And it's actually only until probably about 3 months ago, I've really sorted that side of my neck out. So other than that, I didn't have anything too bad, which is good. A lot of the stuff was manageable. I could manage it on a day-to-day basis. But nothing too bad that would have been like, we got to stop and go home. You know what I mean? So the Achilles was a bit touch and go, all right. But I think I always kind of knew in the back of my mind that I was in good hands. So yeah, that was that. Now again, obviously afterwards then as well, like these little pains and aches started to pop up out of nowhere. And I was just like, what is this now? I was like, oh yeah, just cross the continent of America. That could probably be it. So I had to give myself a couple months just to like really, really light training, a lot of like swimming, a lot of just like yoga, foam rolling, just things that just open the body back up again. Because, you know, when you're stressed as well, you tighten up. And, you know, like people say stress is like, because you're sitting working on a laptop all day, but when you put your body through something like that, it's stress too, you know? So that was just another thing I had to kind of look at afterwards too, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I could only imagine now, and this is what I suppose when you're dealing with people, and especially with people that are getting in contact with me, is like when they're getting back from an injury, or when they're playing and they have an injury, they get these flare-ups. Like especially when they're going back in playing, or if they're going back running, they get a knee flare-up, and then they think, right, I'm back to square one again. So what am I supposed to do? But as you were saying there yourself, like you can put your body through some fairly significant stress once you give it that time in the back end to recover. So you should have done a couple of research papers on it, because I'd be very interested in seeing how that would have adapted, because I'm sure now if you try something down the line that's a bigger distance or a crazier goal, whatever that could be, I couldn't even fathom that at the moment. But if you try something even bigger again, that would stand to you massively. And I can imagine that's what happened between the 12 marathons to the 24 marathons, and from that on, that's going to stand to you all the time, because the body does adapt to that. It gets, although in the time you might break down, but if I tried something like that now off the back of having done nothing, I'd say I wouldn't make it out of California. If Jesus, California would be a good one. I wouldn't make it out of San Antonio, realistically.
Well, I barely made it out of San Antonio either. It was a shooting like 25 minutes before we came up on the street where I was supposed to be cycling up.
Jesus, yeah.
And I was just like, poof. I was just like, Asher, can I cycle up the footpath? The guard looked at me being like, you're obviously not from here, buddy, are you? I was like, no. Yeah, but yeah, like the body adapts. It's pretty amazing what the body can do. Do you know what I mean? And like, it can adapt in good patterns and it can adapt into bad patterns. Do you know what I mean? So like, that's one thing that gives me confidence in these big ultra multi-day events, is that I know by kind of day 9, day 10, that I'm going to be no better or no worse when I wake up. So, you know, it's not as if I get consecutively sore every single day. Like you get to a point where you're just like, oh, I'm the same as I was yesterday. And when I get to that point, I'm like, okay, now it's time to dig the knuckles into the sand and just start kind of horsing along, because I know this is my point where I can kind of just keep going. And that actually, it's strange, but it gives me confidence knowing that if I get to this point, I can actually probably push through, barring nothing going wrong, obviously, you know. So yeah, look, the body is fascinating. And it's one of the things I want to keep doing, is I want to keep exploring as many areas of endurance as I can, because it's just, I find it fun. Do you know what I mean? I think it'd be an awful waste to get to like 70 years old and never have done anything with the gift we've been given here, the two of us. Do you know what I mean? So like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. And a great idea and a great mindset behind it, or driving it. And just a case study on what you were talking about, they had tested, they were looking at an ultra runner once, and I can't think what it is. It's a run in California that they do. And I think it's through the mountains.
Death Valley.
Is that what? Yeah, no, sorry, yeah, it's the Death Valley one. You're right.
Yeah.
And there was a guy that they were doing a case study on at the time who got 2 stress fractures in both legs from doing it. Obviously, he had his like whatever, the body started to break down because of the heat and because of everything around it. But it was the same thing, is that they found. I think it was an ultra endurance. I think it was long. How long is Death Valley?
Not 100% sure, but I think it's like 120 miles, maybe more.
How many days is that? Do you know? Because I think it was over a span of like 5 days. Is what this guy was.
Well, it could be the Moab 240 then maybe as well. It's a Moab 240, and then you've got the Death Valley 100. I think it's 120, 140 miles. That would run into a 2-day thing.
Yeah. Whatever. It was a fairly multi-day endurance event. But basically, what they found is that at a certain point, that the body had stopped breaking down from the stress fractures, and it had started to heal itself, even though he was still running. And it's it's a survival tactic. It obviously gives you pain. It gives you get injuries because you're doing too much, but the body doesn't survive off of pain and injuries. It survives from staying going and making sure you push on. And that's when it does. Like, now I should also cover this and say that don't anyone take that advice and say that Robbie said that I could just stay going until it started healing. But it does. And there is definitely back into that as well, of how you were saying when you get to that day 9 or 10, that you're not going to get any worse, that things will actually start getting better. So looking at that, right, so what was the toughest time, do you say? Now, I know you've talked about the Achilles and that. Is there any day that you said, right, day 10, let's say, or 9, that you said, right, this is it?
There was one particular day in the Rockies where I was really, really struggling. I think it was day 16. But basically what had happened was we were about to cross over Wolf Creek. So Wolf Creek Canyon is 11,000 feet. And just for those in Ireland, like Cron too, Mount Brandon would be 3,000. So imagine stacking like 4 Mount Brandons on top of each other and having to cycle up it on a bike. So that was a really, really hard day. I struggled a lot. My heart rate was quite high. It was like blood dripping out of my nose. I was coughing up blood. Like I was in kind of starting to think, like, should I bring my doctor back at home just to make sure I'm not going to freaking die? Do you know what I mean? So like that was a really, really tough day mentally. And we were behind, like I was behind where I was meant to be. I was actually behind by about 200K. Just from the start to right all the way up, not that I didn't, like, we were in the Rockies, not that I underestimated Sierra Nevadas. Like the Sierra Nevadas are a serious mountain range as well. But the weather was just so bad at the start. There was snow, there was ice, there was wind and rain. Like we still went all day, every day, but not to the extent that what we thought we could. And it's gas, like we talk about. So with that day climbing off Wolf Creek, that day was both the worst and the best day, because I got to the top of Wolf Creek. And when you look at the map of America, you can literally see the lumps on the GPS, and the lumps on the GPS of the map are the mountains. And when you look between the top of Wolf Creek, which is the very end of the Rockies, all the way to New York, there's no more lumps. So for me, that was a massive struggle, but also a massive win. And I remember descending downhill for a whole day. That's how long it took me to get out of the Rockies. So I was up there for like 6 days. It took me a day of cycling downhill. So that was both a massive, massive struggle and a massive, massive win as well. Kind of in the same day.
Jeez, and when you got there, was it like, do you feel that, let's say, the blood is running out your nose and you're thinking, will I call a doctor? Is there a certain turning point in that day? Is there a certain, like, you use that coping strategy and then you're good to go? Or like, would you say there's a turn? I can't imagine that's what it is, but is there a turning point that keeps you going?
Kind of, it's funny. Like, that's a great question. I think one of the things that it's when I think back in the moment, you don't notice the turning points, but then when you look back in hindsight, you're like, geez, that was a big turning point there. So we got to the top of Wolf Creek, and I actually had a friend with me from New York, Tim Clark, who's a former professional triathlete and is also a firefighter on 19th Street. And we had met in an Ironman a couple of years ago, just general chit chat. He like noticed my Irish accent. And he was like, how the hell, what are you doing at this race? Like, it's in the middle of nowhere in America. I was like, sure, it's good crack. Like, and his grandfather was from Mayo. So we kind of just, stayed mates and stuff. And he came and he cycled with me. And for him, like at that point, we got to the top of Wolf Creek. When he turned to me on the bike and he said, like, you're pushing more power than you were yesterday. So even though I felt a lot weaker, I didn't feel as strong. I thought in my head, I was like, just this thing's taking forever. I'm really, really struggling here. We got to the top then, and my dad was there in the camper van. I could see the Irish flag. And Tim was just like, I don't know how this guy's still going. And Tim was like broken after 3 days on the bike, and he flew home to New York. And like, I kept going for like another 19 days. and he was just like, man, I have no idea how you're going to keep going. But he said, I can't wait to see you in New York. And then from there, just to descend downhill for like a whole day, I was just like, I'm going to and then the next day was the day I realized that if I keep moving, America will run out of land, and I do remember as well, like, you talk about visualization. I think the last hill I had to climb in the whole continent was Bear Mountain in New York. And Bear Mountain is, you go over a bridge basically, and you climb up this huge mountain pass, and it zigzags up the mountain. When you get to the top, you literally descend down into New York. It was absolutely class. I remember saying to myself on that day, I said, if I survive Wolf Creek, if I get out of Colorado and down into Kansas, I'll climb Bear Mountain, the big ring, on my bike. And it wasn't anything, like, I was just kind of saying, like, I owe it to myself to do this last one on my own in the big ring. Because all the big mountains in Colorado, you do all those mainly in the big ring, or a lot of times the small ring. But I said to myself, if I can get to Bear Mountain, and if I can get to the bottom of Bear Mountain in good shape and in good spirits and in good mind, I will climb that last mountain in the big ring. So I know that America is throwing everything at me, and it's won a few individual battles, but I'll win the last one before I get down into New York. So I was thinking about that quite a lot, and I never told the crew anything. I didn't tell them. I kept that one for myself. I didn't post on social media. I did nothing. I was like, this is just for me. So that was like both a big turning point, and I'd say a very, very key moment in the whole trip.
Yeah, and that's however you do it, setting challenges for yourself within it it comes back to those small wins in terms of, like, you're setting them along the way, and you're accomplishing your own, what you set out for yourself, like a smaller goals in along the big goal, which is, I suppose it does come back to, again, which is a very interesting coping strategy. And I can see how it would work, because when I was boxing, like, I used to be running, I hated running, but all I said is, if I get to the next pole, I can stay going. And if I can get to the next one, I can stay going. So that was kind of my coping strategy for that. Not that it was anywhere near what you had done or on any scale at all, but it's funny that how you can just set that to the next thing, and it becomes a bit of a process. Then it's like, all right, I've gotten there, and the next one comes on. Now, you were saying day 16 was your toughest one when you got to Wolf's Creek, and you said 2 days later. So you're after going downhill, and you're after going through the biggest challenge of the whole thing, or one of the biggest challenges, and then that's when you come up with that idea of if I keep moving, America will run out of land. Mm-hmm. Really interesting how after the biggest challenge, or after you've accomplished one of the biggest challenges, that's when it's time to stay going, or that's when you've it figured out, basically. Do you reckon that Wolf Creek had played into that?
Yes, possibly. But then as well, when you think about it, right, I had just gone over the actual quote unquote halfway mark. So I think when you look at, say, it was like a pyramid. So I went up, and then at, day 18 to be the halfway. So day 19, I was just like, right, I'm working my way back down now. I'm ticking them off. I'm closer to the finish than I am from the start. Yeah. So I think that was a big thing. And my dad said it to me in the morning. He goes, sure, nearly there now. I was just like, what are you talking about, man? We're freaking in the middle of nowhere here. He said, but you got past the halfway mark. And he's like, oh yeah, I am. And like that, just little things like that, they give you such like good boost mentally. Do you know what I mean? So like, that's why, but then as well, it's also, I suppose, I'm going to contradict myself here. It's also important then to focus on the day at hand. So what I found in America was 36 days, obviously, but I could only literally focus on what I had to do. I couldn't think too far ahead, because what I would do is I would lose my kind of, I suppose, my presence of that day. Like, I had to focus on doing this day to the best of my ability, to do this run to the best of each step, each pedal of the bike. I had to do it as best I can on that day. And I knew if I won today that I'd be able to stand up and fight tomorrow as well. But I had to make sure that while balancing the thinking ahead, I also had to balance in staying present and just winning the day here first. I thought that was really, really important as well. So it's interesting how it was kind of like day 19. I was kind of like, yeah, we got this. But because day 18, no, we pass over the halfway mark or whatever, So that was key. Okay.
And then digging in from that, then before we kind of come back to the mindset side of things, I suppose we'll venture into my side of things. What were your recovery strategies as you went through it? What did you do to recover better?
Yeah, food. A lot of food, man. I was putting away about 8,000 calories a day. And I still lost a good bit of weight. So like, that's probably something I'd look at again for the future. Sleep was key. I found sleep quite broken at the start, but then it gets to a point where you're just so tired. I'd say if I slept on the floor of the bathroom in the campsite, I'd probably fall asleep. Do you know what I mean? So like, the sleep early on is key. I've learned from events in the past that my sleep isn't great for the first few days. And then it's almost a thing where it starts getting like kind of mental, because I'm like, I know sleep is so important. Like, it is really important to me. So I need to make sure when I get to a point like 4 or 5 days in, I'm so tired, I just fall asleep anyway. So sleep was key. Obviously, a lot of deep tissue work with Ali, my physio. Like, she was phenomenal. I would have been pretty goosed without her. And then usually it was kind of, a day would look like this. Basically, it's up early, 6, half 5, 6, huge breakfast, depending on what I was doing on that day. If I was cycling, I would eat more because I can, stomach more. If I was running, I actually wouldn't eat much, and I'd eat a lot on the back end of the day. Go from 7 to about 12, so 5 hours straight, and then stop for a big lunch or dinner, and then do another block of 4 to 5 hours and have another dinner. Bit of Ben and Jerry's, few Oreo cookies, and then into bed and literally just lie there and try to fall asleep for the next day. So that was kind of it. Obviously, then the physio sessions, 1 in the morning while I was eating, 1 at lunch if I needed anything like my Achilles or my neck or something rubbed out, and then the evening again, it was a lot of kind of deep tissue stuff, a lot of kind of passive stretching and stuff, and just to kind of help get a bit of range of motion back in again. But yeah, we kept it pretty basic, like the fundamentals that I'm kind of used to: sleep, water, food, bit of soft tissue work, and try to keep it going.
Yeah, that's like, really, it does come back to that. It does come back to the fundamentals of what you can do right, and what you can do on a daily basis as well. And obviously the calories are going to be huge for something as significant as that, with the sleep as well. One interesting one, actually, and it could be fun for you to look into a small bit more if you are going to do those ultra endurance events, is they've started research, it's actually out of Stanford as well, that they're looking at the palms of your hands and the bottom of your feet are the quickest, and your face are the fastest ways that you can dissipate heat. Okay, so jumping into a cold bath, jumping into an ice bath isn't that good for you, because basically it just vasoconstricts, everything tightens up, and you don't get any blood flow. But if you have these, if you can cool your hands and cool the bottom of your feet, you can directly cool your muscles, because you have these anastomosis or capillaries right on the sole, or right in the sole of your feet and right in the palm of your hands. So if you can cool that, you can increase your performance. And what they did is, what they looked at was a guy doing pull-ups, basically, NFL athlete, and they got him to do 10 sets. And on the first day, he did 100 reps off the bat. That was his thing, like. And then they started cooling his hands and his feet in between sets. And by day 4 or day 5, he was up between 300 and 600 pull-ups in 10 sets. So it's something that's only coming out at the moment, but it's definitely something to look into if you're going to be doing those events in future. Just holding a cool bottle of water in there. And it's just another little technique that you can use to lower muscle temperature. But yeah, it could be just one to take away. If you were looking into it, I can get more research on it for you. But it's very interesting one, how you can really look into how to optimize it now at the moment. And it's something that I'm doing with a lot of people, especially anyone that I'm working with that's a runner, that's an ultra, like that's running, like, I don't know how they're doing it, but running the 100 milers and stuff like that, or 24-hour runs, however they go doing that type of stuff. You could see how it would play into it. But
absolutely.
I was just looking to see if you had any really interesting techniques, but you just kept it simple, kept the fundamentals right. It's probably the best way of doing it.
Yeah, one thing I would also like to do in the evening times is, depending on where the campsite was, like if it was if we grass and stuff like that, is I just get into my bare feet and I just stand or sit out in the grass and do a bit of grounding, bit of kind of really light stretching. Like, if I could sit down into some form of a squat or something, just again, open up the ankle joints, the knee joint, just things like that. Or what I would do is I'd sit, on a very, very small stool and just really try sit into that squat position, keep my just bare feet on the grass and stuff like that, just for 10, 15 minutes on my own, bit of light breathing. And I just felt like it would really help me calm me down, like before I go to sleep. Because, look, the day is a long day. You're putting a lot of food in, a lot of calories, a lot of caffeine, some sugar. I'm just like, rather than just like literally falling into bed, I'm just like, just go back out, wind down, sleep. So they were just some really, really basic things. Again, they're super. He's always as well. Just a bit of, as much as I love obviously being in and around with the crew, it was nice to just gather some thoughts and reflect on the day myself as well. And then at that point of the day, when the day's work is done, like on the road, I would shift my thinking to be like, okay, how can I best tackle this route tomorrow?
Yeah, okay. And I that's something I must look into a bit more, is grounding and how it affects the body, because if there is like a natural change in ion, I don't know exactly what it is, positive ions to negative ions, from doing that, from standing on the earth. But it's something that I have to look into more. But moving on from that then, and looking at when you are actually in the zone. So when you're moving through it and you're on the bike or you're running, what's going through your head? Do you find that you get into a flow state step after step, or do you at a certain point, or is it like you're always jumping over and back?
It's a mixture between the flow state and just thinking of absolutely random weird stuff.
Yeah.
Mainly it's I can get into I'm just so used to it now, Robbie. I can literally turn off my brain when I'm in these things. Like at the moment I'm training for an ultra swim. And like last night I was out swimming for like nearly 3 hours, and like it felt like 20 minutes. So I can just like, I can just literally switch off my brain and be like, boom, this is what I'm doing. Just focusing on very basic things like hand into the water, breathing, keeping my eye on the horizon, little things like that. It's the same across America. Now, the other thing as well is that at the moment, my environment is really important to me. So like where I am swimming, where I am, everything I'm doing, like I'm always quite aware of my environment. So like my swimming in this harbor I train in, I know the place. I literally like could nearly name the fish for you at the bottom of the sea. Do you know what I mean? Could nearly name, oh, that jellyfish, he was here last week as well. Do you know what I mean? So like I'm so used to it. Whereas in America, every single thing was new. So I was very taken aback and drawn into the environment, because like I've never been here before. Like this is really cool. Like you're looking around and you're going through these little towns, and you go through a little village that's literally abandoned. The next thing you get into like this thing that looks like a city, and then you're desert again, to Kansas, and places like we're not used to in the west of Ireland. Do you know what I mean? So like for me, that helped me really kind of just put everything in the world out of my mind. Like it was weird. I get into this thing, man, after a few days into these events, month it is. All I know is it's day 9, day 10, day whatever it is. You know what I mean? And it's as if there's nothing else happening in the outside world. It's really strange. I know obviously some of the brands and sponsors and stuff that were absolutely hate it, because I'm really poor on social media in these events. Generally, I'm quite good, but in these events, I just get into, I'm here to do a job. I'm not here to be on my phone all day. Do you know what I mean? And I just get really sucked in. So yeah, it's kind of like a bit of both, I guess, really.
Jesus, yeah. I don't know how that idea of getting into that mindset. I know when you are training hard, that it is kind of like a minute or a couple of hours feel like a minute. And as I was saying, it's going to be something that I definitely will look at down the road. In looking at these type of ultra endurance events, I'd love to get involved in just one. I suppose I probably should start off with something small, but I will build up to it, because one of the guys, a friend of mine, he's they're going for a fairly significant role now. I can't talk about it yet, but I can talk to you about it after. But I can't talk about it and just say it because it hasn't been released. But in that same thing, since he's kind of said it to me, I've always been thinking about like, what is the next thing? What could you do after? And I think you're after just touching on something there, and I'd love to dig into that just for a couple of minutes about the swim. What's the swim about, and what's going on there?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm training for an ultra swim. Basically it's the length of Dingle Bay. So from Cahersiveen to Dingle, South Kerry to West Kerry. It's about 18 kilometers, maybe just under it in duration. Kind of just came up with the idea a few years ago. I was running around the mountains. I do a lot of mountain running and hiking and stuff here. Obviously, it's one of my favorite pastimes. And every time I'm up on the top of Mount Brandon, you can look across and you can see Croghantoul, which is the highest mountain in Ireland. And then obviously the town below it is one of the towns close to it is Cahersiveen. There's just a huge bay sitting in between Dingle, which is my home, and can be mad to swim like from there to here. And then, I never really kind of did anything about it. And then I asked, about a year ago, I asked one of the guys here, like, that's enough. So yeah, I've been training for quite a while now. It's definitely different. It's a lot easier on the body than ultra running. It is a lot of fun. I've definitely built another layer of fitness onto my into my wall. I guess I put another brick in the wall for sure. And swimming's always been a bit of a weak point for me, so it's really, really good for me to be almost like a student of something again in endurance, because we can get very used to being good at one thing and then really just sticking to that. But I like to subject myself to things that maybe I'm not really great at and that I have to work really hard on, because I feel like I get more out of it then. Look, it's just another string to the bow. Like I'd love to be someone who can kind of swim with the swimmers, run with the runners, hike with the hikers, and cycle with the cyclists. Do you know what I mean? So I just like that. I like being not one dimensional and doing different things. So yeah, I'm hoping to have a crack at that early September. We're hoping to give it a go. So that'll be a first as well. I don't think anybody's done it before. So yeah, should be a bit of crack anyway.
Jesus, yeah, bit of crack would be one way of describing it. But best of luck with that. Absolutely best of luck with that. And sorry, it just skipped out there for a second. The connection did. What you said this is for a charity? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that actually. I'm going to raise money here for the local old folks home and the local hospital. So they basically they both kind of look after the old people in our community here in Dingle. And just after the last year and a half we've had with COVID and stuff like that, it's been a really, really hard time for a lot of people. I know a lot of people that like have lost grandparents and things like that to COVID. So the local community hospital here are fantastic. They're building a new garden for their residents. And then the old folks home, they do a Meals on Wheels service. So basically they cook dinners every single 7 days a week and deliver meals to older people in around Dingle and West Kerry living on their own. It's hard because sometimes the person coming delivering the dinner, it might be the only person that they see on that day. And that's really sad. And like, think about everything that we now have in the world, that there's people, close to us here at home that are lonely and that like don't really see anybody, and it's hard, and I want to be able to make sure that, look, we look after people in our local community as well. And I think that's, it's something nice. And it's nice because I'm finishing in Dingle and stuff as well, that I can do that,
Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll start kind of coming to wrapping it up. And a few things that I want to discuss just before we jump in, that is, from doing these, like, I suppose they're life-changing events, massive events, for really good purpose, or like, I mean, you've a purpose in doing it, and for an excellent, you've reason as well. And when you are doing those, like, what are the biggest learnings that you have? What have you learned from doing it yourself? And then on top of that, how has it changed your approach to life and the way you live your life at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing I've learned, really, I suppose, across the board, is that it's going to be hard. That, like, I see a lot of similarities between endurance and life. There's going to be things that you plan out and you want to do, and they won't work out, and that's okay. But knowing that you can get up, or you can dust yourself off, and you can give it a go again, I think that's really, really important. And I just wish it was something I wish it's something I learned or knew as a young lad growing up, that, look, it's going to be okay. You're going to have to give things a go a couple of times to make it work. You're going to have to back yourself, and you're going to have to give this thing a go, because that's really, I suppose, what I missed growing up, is that, look, I was very happy playing my sports and stuff like that, but I was never really like passionate about anything. Do you know what I mean? So like, when, like, school really wasn't my thing, or college, and I just wasn't really, would say, I always say, is book smart, like, but I could put my mind to something, I could do it, and like, that's the thing as well. Like, I've noticed patterns in my life, that if I work hard at something, it generally works out. And even things like, even though as much as I hated school, and what felt like school hated me, like, I still did a good leaving cert because I worked hard at it for a couple of months beforehand. And same as, like, if I work hard at my training and my endurance, I can generally do what I want to do. So I think one of the things that endurance has taught me is that hard work, like, life will reward effort. So sometimes you feel like life doesn't reward effort, but it does. And some days effort might be just literally getting out of bed, but another day an effort might be a 2-hour run, and it's different for everybody. So anybody listening in, just, do what you can on any given day. And try and show up for yourself first of all, because, look, we all want to show up for other people, of course, but I think unless you show up for yourself, figure out what you want to do yourself first, because it's next to impossible to pour from an empty glass. So do what you need to do for yourself, because the more you look after yourself, the more you can help other people. So I think I might have answered the two in the one go there, but they're kind of, that's really the biggest thing I've learned over the last number of years.
Yeah, and backing yourself as well, and having that belief, that sense of belief, or that self-belief that you are going to get what you want to get if you put in the time, is huge. I hear you saying as well, you talked about it as well when you were during the race, about being present, and how having presence was a huge thing that helped you get through the day. Is that something you practice now a bit more?
Yeah, massively, because we live in a world where it's next to impossible to stay present, because everything, we've phones and laptops and notifications and stuff like that. Like, I'm absolutely notorious. Like, if someone tries to ring me, they're like, "Are you dead, or what's the story?" Like, I'm just like, I have every single notification turned off my phone. Like, so if someone, like, I just don't get it, just doesn't bing, it doesn't vibrate, anything. Do you know what I mean? Now I do have like a separate thing where, like, if my family need me or something like that, they, obviously the phone rings. But like, I just think that in a world full of distraction, I think it's very, very disciplined to be able to stay in presence and doing what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? So that's something I try and do, and it's something I've learned over the last number of years. I know it's hard to do when our work is predominantly online, it's all the time, but I do think as well that, if you can try your best, focus on staying in better connection with the people around you, and you'll have better connection with the work you're doing too.
Yeah. Sorry, now it's just the connection was unstable there right at the very end. You were what you finished on, from what I picked up, was try and stay connected to people around you. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it's like connected to people around you, connected to the work you're doing, and then you'll find that you've a better connection with yourself then as well. You get more work done, you feel better, etc., etc. Because there's endless hours of scrolling on the phone. I don't know if it's doing anybody any good. Do you know what I mean? So I think just staying present is really important. It's something I try and do in my training as well. It's a knock-on effect to other areas of life as well.
Perfect. Good. Okay, and then the very last thing is, what tips have you for people who would want to get into doing an event like this, or doing something for a charity, or doing something bigger than themselves? What tips did you have?
Don't do it.
Stay away.
Oh God. No, I mean, look, just like one run can change your life. One run can change your life. One act of goodness can change another person's life. So what I would probably say is, don't just do something for the sake of doing something. Do something that's important to you. Do something that's meaningful to you. Do something that will have an impact to others that are close to you. Don't just do it for yourself. And look, just people that do things for themselves, that's absolutely perfect. But I just do things a little bit differently. Do you know what I mean? Ultimately, at the same time, I obviously do a lot of these events for myself as well. But try and help other people as you're going, because look, 95% of the people who listen to this, Robbie, or this show, or in a couple months' time or whatever, putting your 2 feet on the floor in the morning is a gift. And that is a gift that a lot of people do not have. So what I would do is I would harness that, use it as much as you can, and never, ever, ever take that for granted, because it could be taken away from you very, very quickly. And like I said, if, my goal is really to get to an old age and be like, geez, I had some crack, like I did a lot of stuff. And, it's not really about status or money or anything like that. It's just like, I got everything out of my best buy sell date, and I'm going to make sure that, everybody knows about it. So I think, look, that's kind of what I'd recommend. If you are going doing something like this, make it fun, involve other people, build a good team, and soak in the memories as well, because we can get so caught up in the events and the planning and the execution and the social media and all that kind of stuff. But don't forget to soak in the moment as well.
Absolutely excellent point, I think, to finish on. I think that's exactly what we should finish on when we do that. Shane, thanks a million for coming on. I think that podcast went into so much more detail and had so much more substance to it than I could have even imagined. We really went into detail on what it was about, what was like, what the purpose of it was, how self-belief was a massive thing in it. So honestly, thanks a million for coming on to that. It was excellent to have you.
Thanks, Robbie. Appreciate having me, mate. And best of luck with everything in the future yourself as well.
And just before we go, you are doing a training weekend coming up over the summer. So do you want to talk a small bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose, look, I think a lot of what I'll be doing over the next couple of years will be bringing people to my little corner of the world here in Dingle. So we've got a training weekend coming up in August, but we hope to roll out a lot more of them over the next kind of months and year as well. So things like wellness weekends, we'll do hiking retreats, stuff like that, just where people can come, they can detach, they can kind of stay in a nice place, eat good food, see nice places. This place in the world. So I just wanted people to share that with people, get people to experience that. And not everybody can afford to, athletes anyways, and runners and stuff, not everybody can afford and to go to Lanzarote training for like 7 days or 10 days or something like that maybe you could come down to Dingle for a while as well, and you'd be well looked after.
Yeah, and a beautiful part of the country as well. Has to be one of the nicest places in the country. Second to Clare, obviously. Second to the Burn. But
we won't fall out over, Robbie.
No. No, I'm only messing. But yeah, if anyone's interested in that, definitely check it out on. You can see it on your website. Follow Shane at Shane Finn on Instagram and Facebook. But you have the website anyway, don't you?
Yep.
Which is most important.
Yep. Shane Finn everywhere, and you'll find me.
And Pushing Limits podcast, which I appeared on myself, an excellent podcast, and gets on top class guests aside from myself, but everyone else was good in it. But thanks a million for jumping on, Shane. I really enjoyed it. I think people will take a lot from this, And yeah, absolute best of luck in your swim as well. You're doing it for a great cause, and I'm delighted to see that you're still pushing on and always changing.
Appreciate it, buddy. No.
Okay.
Thanks very much, buddy. Appreciate it, and best of luck with everything yourself as well.
Yeah, same to yourself. Okay, that's it from us today, guys. Thanks a million for listening, and we'll chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you took something from that. I think the podcast went into a lot of detail, and it had real substance in why Shane does what he does and the purpose behind doing it. And I think it's an excellent example for people to challenge themselves, to test themselves, and always push the limit and see what you can achieve. Because if you're challenging yourself, you get into that mindset, you'll be surprised what you can do. And I think Shane is a great example, and he's living that life at the moment. So if anyone has any questions on it, make sure to get in contact with myself or send a message to Shane. That's at Shane Finn. And please, guys, if you enjoyed the podcast, I'd love if you could share it with a friend or send it to a friend and share it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you listen to it on. Also, on top of that, if you could please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, whatever you're listening to it on, and leave a rating if it's on iTunes. That would be excellent, as it really helps promote the podcast and gives me a better chance of getting more guests like Shane and people who are doing great things. So that's everything for me today, guys. Really enjoyed this podcast. I hope you did too, and we're going to push on for the next couple of weeks because I have a couple of excellent top class guests coming on that you're really going to enjoy. So hope everyone is doing well out there, and I will chat to you all again soon. Have a good one.